Well, hello everybody and welcome to the IONS Portland very first ever Zoom meeting. And I see that as we're talking, there are more and more people that are coming online with us. I will ask everybody to, as you come online with us, Zoom your, put your phone on mute or mute yourself online, however that works for you as you come online. That would be helpful to us. Okay. So we usually do a little bit of housekeeping when we're in person. This time, I'll just tell you a bit about IONS. And first of all, our mission at IONS is advancing the science of consciousness and human experience to serve individual and collective transformation. The Institute of Noetic Sciences explores the frontiers of consciousness, builds bridges between science and spirit, researches subtle energies and the powers of healing, inquires into the science of love, forgiveness, and gratitude, studies the effects of conscious and compassionate intention, seeks to understand the basis of prevailing worldviews, practices freedom of thought and freedom of spirit. In a second here, we're going to turn this meeting over to Shariff Abdullah, but I did want to say that for everybody, what we'll probably do is Shariff will give a presentation, and then at the end, we'll open it up to questions. In the meantime, if you wish to send us a message via the chat, I'll be watching those messages come through. And then when Shariff has concluded his presentation, we can read your messages, answer your questions, that kind of thing. And I see that, gosh, while I was doing that, more and more people have come online. I think what we're up to about, I don't know, 14 people, good. So yeah, so anybody that just came on, I'm going, just mute yourself as you come on again. That's one thing. So Barbara, did you want to add anything to that? You can unmute yourself, Barbara, and talk.
Hi there. Welcome everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, for some reason my camera was turned off by the host, and it looks like everybody else's camera's off too. I'm not sure if that's something that you did or Shariff did.
Shariff did that because when he makes his presentation, he'll be doing a slideshow. So that's why we can't see everybody. But once he's done with his presentation, then we'll be able to see everybody.
Oh, okay, terrific. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for being here today. We don't have to tell you about where the restrooms are because you all know. By getting some kind of centering exercise, but I imagine Shariff will do something like that just to pull us all together as a unit. So again, thanks for coming, and thanks, Teresa. I'll mute myself now.
Good. Well, I don't know that we need to do any more of the housekeeping. Shariff, would you like to kick this off with just by introducing yourself, and then maybe do a little centering sort of a meditation for everybody? I think that might be really nice.
I would be more than happy to do so. And hello, everybody. And our everybody's are up to about 17 now, which is nice. We each have had different kinds of days already. We've had various folks doing various things, and especially with our joint situation with the coronavirus. I shouldn't say joint, I should say global situation, and our responses and reactions to that. So what we should be doing is looking at pulling ourselves into not a physical space like where you meet at Tabor space, but into a psychic and emotional space, a space where we can commune together, and a space where we can learn together, and a space that we can co-create. Now, some of us are from different places in the world. A lot of us are from Portland. So, and I'm looking at our list here. So I will, wherever you may be, I'm going to ask you to do a centering. it's a little hard for me to be visible on a screen where meditation is going on. So let me actually take my video out for a few minutes and ask each of us to take a really nice deep breath. And then another one. And as you are breathing, allow whatever you have been holding on to, any tensions or any worries or any concerns, allow them just to drop away from you right now. And have yourself filled with positive energy. Have yourself filled with light. And recognize that that self is brimming with light. So you have so much light inside of you, so much light inside your heart that it shines out for everyone. And any fears that you may be experiencing, any doubts you may be experiencing, anything that's left less than your truest and highest self, just have it fall away as you're shining your light out into the world. Although we're not in the same room at the same time, we are together. So I'm going to ask you to come back to a center, to open your eyes as I'm opening mine, and let's participate together. Let's get a good vibration going here in this space at this time. What I want us to do is I want to do some housekeeping, and I want us to get a little bit used to our Zoom format here. So I'm going to ask you some questions. But first, I want to share my screen with you, and that screen says. There's like 3 buttons I have to push in order to share a screen. So that's why I'm searching around, and there we go. Okay, so my first screen says welcome. So welcome to the next couple of hours, and I'm looking at having a very lively presentation to you. But I also want to have some discussions around this. So there'll be questions that I'm asking along the way. And I'm going to break us into small groups, and I'll talk about all that stuff in order. So, housekeeping. If you've got distractions, try to do your best to minimize them right now, okay? I've already turned my phone on jet mode, which means that I'm not going to be getting or receiving any calls or any signals or anything like that. If you're at home, you're at the mercy of whoever else is in your home. But if you can try to keep your distractions to a minimum, close the door, ask folks not to be disturbing you, try to create the kind of space that you would have if we were face-to-face right now. So if you've even got other screens open right now, so I don't even know if they're football games anymore, but if you're looking at the football game, try not to do that. That would, if you weren't going to do that, if we were live, then you shouldn't do it while we're in cyberspace here. This is being recorded. It's being recorded right now. I want you to remember that we're not going to go through and edit out, anything. And so what I want you to do is be thoughtful on how you are sharing, and be thoughtful on how you are asking questions and things like that. Now, when we go into small groups, the small group you are in will not be recorded. We don't. The Zoom doesn't have the capability of recording small groups. However, there'll be one small group of the whole, and I'll explain what I mean by that when we get to our small groups. And that one is purposely there to be recorded. And so when we get to that point, I'll explain a little bit more about what that means. If you don't want to be recorded in that situation, then you don't have to be. Look at the buttons on your screen, on the bottom of your Zoom window, and you'll see things that say mute. When you hit that button, you are unmuted. You hit it again, you are muted. Start and stop your video if you want to stop your video, if you don't want people to see you, or if I don't want people to see you, then stop your video. When you're asking a question, and we'll get to that in a second, I want you to unmute yourself so I can hear you, but also start your video so I can see you. So people will be popping in and popping out of the view window. We also, at various times, I'm going to ask everybody to turn their screens on. Everybody who can turn their screens on will do so. And then I'll ask you all collectively to turn them back off again. This is going to make a very clean recording for the people who are who want to attend but can't attend right now. So we're going to do polls, and I can poll you by asking you to raise your hand. Now I'm going to stop the share for a second, and I want to, what's at the bottom of my screen, since I'm a host, is very different from what's at the bottom of your screen. But somewhere along the bottom of this screen, you're going to see something that says raise hands, okay? And that's when you want to get my attention. You would raise your hand, and you would, if there's a question that you want to ask, you can raise your hand. And if there is, I may ask you to respond to to a question by raising your hand. So we're going to try that right now. I see somebody had already put their hand up and took it back down. So if you are in the Portland area right now, put your hand up. And I'm seeing hands going up. I've got 4 hands up so far. There are people that I know are sitting right here in Portland and they're not raising their hand. Oh, there goes some more. Okay. So
Shariff, Teresa here. Yes. I don't see where it says raise hand. And I know Barbara's said that she doesn't see it either.
Okay, so so Teresa, you may not see it because you're now a co-host. Okay, so I can't raise my hand. And I don't know why anyone else could not raise their hand. Someone's calling in on the telephone, which is perfectly fine. The problem is the button isn't there. People are asking, what does the raise hand function look like? It looks like a hand. So there are a couple of people who are saying I don't see it, and I can't help you because I can't.
It's a hand.
Yeah, I can't. I don't know where that is on your screen.
There is a more button. There's a more button at the lower right. If you press more, it gives you the option to raise or lower your hand.
Thank you. And so that may be because your screen isn't wide enough. That's where the more button shows up. So if you want to widen your screen a little bit, you may show that, or you can click on more and then you can click on raise hand. So I see a couple of people who are in Portland that still have not raised their hands. So did you see the more? The more button that's on the right-hand side of your screen. So someone is saying my raise hand is at the top of the screen. I have a pull down menu. Still not seeing it. Okay, so we're going to give you the second option now for raising your hand. And that is to start your video and wave your hand around. That's the low tech. Okay, right. I see it now. Okay, I got you. So so that will give us a chance to be acknowledged if you have a really burning question. There'll be times when I stop and I ask questions. Okay, but if it's not at that moment, then I'll give you some opportunities to be responding and to raise your hand. Okay, so let me go back to my. Let me go back to sharing my screen.
Just turn on your
And using the chat box. It looks like everybody found out where the chat box was. I don't have to say any more about that. Participating in the breakout rooms or the small group sessions, Zoom has the ability to have us divide into any number of groupings. Since we've got about 16 people on the call, we'll probably divide into, 4 groups of 4, or we'll divide into 3 groups of 5, or 5 groups of 3, however we want to do that. I control that part, how many we divide into from my screen. And I'm going to encourage you, when you get offered to be in the group, to go into the group as soon as you can. It's only a little slightly rude to the people who are there waiting for you to be in their group, for you for you to show up late. So when I go to divide you, you will have the opportunity to actually join the group. And when you join the group, I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask everyone to monitor time, so that if there are 3 of you and you've got 6 minutes to discuss a particular thing, that doesn't mean one of you gets 5 minutes and everybody else has to share a minute. Please try to monitor yourself, but also don't hesitate to encourage. Everyone will give everyone else permission to say, let's take a look at time, if anybody happens to be going on too long. Asking questions, I said, either raise your digital hand, or if you've got a question, turn your screen on and raise your hand that way. Okay, so let's talk a bit about, let's get into the content of our day, but let's get into the context for that content. For those of you who have done work with me before, I talk about the mess being the interrelated mega crises that's affecting everybody on the planet. The mess being intractable, the mess being created by a form of consciousness, and the mess goes away when we change that consciousness. Now, we're all very acutely aware of the corona chaos that we're experiencing nowadays. I would encourage us to look deeper at our situation, look deeper at the context. Once you start looking at it, you can put this into a context that is not to say this isn't serious, but to say that we've got lots and lots and lots of things that are very, very serious. And to look at it from the point of view not of, oh my God, what can we do? I'm so afraid. I call the news the fear machine, and the fear machine's been in overdrive in the last couple of months. I don't think that we should be afraid. I think that we should be responsive, and I think that we should be knowledgeable, and we should use the powers that we know that we've got to transcend our fear, and to use the powers that we know we've got for us to look at this situation from the point of view of what can I do to transform the situation. One of the things I've been doing is walking around, and one of the things I've been doing is smiling. I make eye contact with people, I smile at them, and I take my heart energy and I project it to them. And I'd say 5 times out of 10, they start smiling back. And their consciousness energy, and that's all we're going to talk about today, is consciousness energy, gets lifted by that. And when the consciousness energy gets lifted, they create a shield around themselves, unconsciously, create a shield around themselves that will prevent any virus, coronavirus, or anything else from getting to you. The thing that will save us are the things that we know. Now, if we take everything that we know and throw it out the window and start running around like chickens with our heads cut off, we will just be another part of the mess. I bet everybody on this call knows about the laws of attraction. What you think about, what you worry about, what you fear, you get more of. So, I've been talking an awful lot about higher consciousness lately, and I've been doing what I can do, directly and indirectly, to elevate the thought process. The other thing that we've got is the vision. We can create a vision of a world that works for all beings. I know that because I'm wearing this pin that says creating a world that works for all. And I'm going to tell you in a bit how you can be, well, how you can get a button, and then how you can be part of that vision. We also can be part of the solution. When we defer our own action to the actions of governments or other people or the media or whatever, we rob ourselves of our humanity. Like I said, when I go to Fred Meyer's purposefully to shed consciousness energy, and also to pick up some almond milk, but I'm there to shed consciousness energy. I'm doing my part, and I'm doing something that's very, very powerful, and that power can spread. So our choices are to succumb to the mess or rise to the vision. And we've got the power to do that, and the power comes in consciousness energy, of looking at consciousness energy. So let me talk about this. Let me talk about the volcano, and then let me talk about the coronavirus, and then let me talk about how do we make consciousness useful. In 2017, I was on the island of Bali, as it happened, as one part of it happened to be erupting. it was a major eruption going on, and they cleared all the land around the volcano. Lots of farmers had to leave their land, etc. And everyone was hunkering down for this like major eruption that could have ripped off the eastern part of the island. And as I was there, the news carried a story about the army had cordoned off all of the approaches to the volcano. The army had let pass 6 people, 6 high priests, to go up and spend the night on the island, spend the night on the volcano. And when they came back, they said, we asked the volcano not to erupt now. And the volcano agreed. And so it's going to stop erupting. And they said, the next eruption is going to be in 2032, I think they said. And it's going to be a doozy. So you've got the volcano's given you about 10 years, which is the blink of an eye to a volcano. The volcano will give you about 10, 15 years or so to get yourselves ready for this next eruption. Now, I'm on Bali. All the Westerners are, ha, ha, ha. These guys go up and they talk to a volcano, ha, ha, ha. And all of the Balinese said, thank you. And the volcano stopped erupting. All the seismologists, all of the volcanologists, all of these, the Western folks that were studying this major eruption were mystified as to why it just stopped right in the middle. But for those of us who know about consciousness energy, it stopped because it was asked to stop. Now, let's shift gears to the virus. And I don't know if that is an electron microscope photograph or that's an artist's rendition. That's the nasty little bugger, which is what I said when I first saw that. And then I realized I'm not honoring what that is and who that is and the beingness of that. How many of us on the planet are saying to the coronavirus, what the shamans, what the high priest said to the volcano? Please stop erupting. By honoring the beinghood of that being, and I'm going to talk about that in about 10 minutes, by addressing it out of respect and asking it to do something, it does it. So let's get to some of these the principles. I've got a presentation that will probably go on for about 5 or 6 hours. I've only got an hour and a half to do it. And so what I'm going to do is give you some of the conclusions first, and then cover as much as I can in that process. And maybe set up a time where people would be interested in continuing this conversation. Okay, but first, Benjamin Franklin. We know Benjamin Franklin as the patriot, as the founder of the signer of the Declaration of Independence, the one person who signed all 3 of the documents that created the United States: the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. And he did a lot of other things, but he did this weird experiment with a kite and a key, and we learned about that in elementary school or maybe junior high school, and then promptly forgot about it. And then he's kind of this quaint old guy who's out in the storm with a kite and a key. It was a lot more than that. Benjamin Franklin, the foundation, Benjamin Franklin was the person who created the foundation for electricity. People had known about electricity for 100 years or more. But Franklin was the one that made it useful. Before Franklin, electricity was a parlor game. People created these spark generators. And so you well, after you've had dinner and you go into the parlor, you crank up the spark generator and you touch it and you get a spark and and if you grab the terminals of the spark generator, your hair stands on end and and then you put that away and you light your gas lights and turn on your wood burning fireplace to get warm, because that's all electricity was useful for. It had been known for hundreds of years, but there was no theory behind it. And because there was no theory behind it, there was no way to actually use it. So Benjamin Franklin was the first person in our modern history to develop a functional theory of electricity. Everything we're doing right this second, okay, is due to Benjamin Franklin and nobody else. Everybody who's gaga over Nikola Tesla, Tesla wouldn't have even known what electricity was without Franklin. So his experiments and his theories made electricity useful. And it's interesting that in Europe, Franklin is the person who people think about as a scientist and as the first electrician, not in terms of his patriotic things of signing the Declaration of Independence. So can we make consciousness useful? How many of us have held in consciousness that we're going to get the right parking space and then you get it? Yay, okay. How many of us have said we're going to make more money and yay, we're going to do that? How many of us have been, saying I'm going to find a mate? Yay, well, mine is still. I believe that consciousness is and can be more useful than all of those things. So this is a picture of one of the first electrical generators. You turn the crank, you then touch the glass. There's a piece of wool or felt that rubs the glass. So this is static electricity. You get to make your hair stand on end, etc. So this is the first functional electrical device, the Franklin lightning rod. There's one on your house right now. There's one on every building right now. It's how you conduct the lightning into the ground and not into your house and burn your house down. So this is the first device that was based on a theory of electricity. I don't think it happened this way. I don't think that the angels and the cherubs, etc., were surrounding Franklin when he was doing his experiment. Oh, and by the way, I didn't know that lightning never hit the kite. Okay, if it had, he would have been barbecued instantly. Someone actually conducted his experiment in Europe, and lightning hit the kite, and they were instantly killed. So my question is, how do we make consciousness energy useful? And useful beyond I want this and I want that, but useful to creating a world that is not consumed by violence. Useful in creating a world that doesn't have any sign of poverty in it. Some may have more, some may have less, but everybody's got enough. Useful in that we don't have to wonder where the next war is going to start, because we don't do war anymore. These are the things that I think that we can do. These are things I think that we need to do, but until now, we haven't had the kind of theory that actually makes this useful. So today, what we're going through is my attempt at looking at how to create a functional consciousness? How do we create a useful consciousness? So one way of doing this is by rethinking even what consciousness is. Right now, almost every scientist will tell you that consciousness is an artifact, is created by the gray matter that's up in your skull. That this thing here, this brain, creates consciousness. I would like to suggest otherwise. That consciousness is not an accident or an artifact of brain or neuron activity. That consciousness isn't even located in my brain or your brain or the brain. That consciousness is created by this entity that you see on your screen right now. The combination of brain and heart. And it combined in a way that is stronger than and more powerful than either the brain or the heart. That brain heart, maybe we'll have another word for this. Brain heart is the receiving agent or the organ for consciousness. So your consciousness is elsewhere. You create a receiving organ for it, it's called birth. Your consciousness then sits in there for the time that your meat body is alive. And then when your meat body dies, your consciousness continues on somewhere else. Now, we are not hardly going to talk about where somewhere else is today. We're going to need an awful lot of, a lot more time and maybe some incense burning and chanting and things like that to get to where does consciousness go after your body is done with it. This body is a radio. It's not the signal that it receives, okay? So that's, I was in Nepal some years ago, and I was staying at a hotel. And for those of you who have been to Nepal, you know the hotel, the one that has one of its rooms for $1 a day. You don't know what room it is until you sign in. And if you sign in and then you pay your room and they give you most of your money back, you know you got the $1 a day room and you can stay there as long as you want, like, you know, months and months if you want. Anyway, so in this place, there was a guy who was cleaning rooms. And when he went into a room, they had the television set on. And this is the first time he had ever seen a TV screen before. And yes, there are people in the world, you know, TV is not as ubiquitous as you think it is. And when he saw the screen, he then goes around to the back of the TV to see where the little tiny demons live, how they got into this box and what they're doing in the box. And he's trying to talk to them, like, show me where you live, etc. And it's because he didn't realize that the box does not contain the people. Our brain heart does not contain the consciousness. It is a transmitter of consciousness. It's a receiver of consciousness. Okay, so consciousness for what? What can a functional consciousness do? Well, I'm suggesting that it can stop a volcano. I'm also suggesting it stop and what I'm not quite sure it's an epidemic. I believe that we exercising consciousness energy can say to the carbon that's in our atmosphere, first of all, we're deeply sorry for putting you up there in the first place. Can you please come down to Earth? And the fossil carbon will come down because we ask it to. And then say thank you. And then we'd have to say, we're not going to put any more up there. I think that it can reduce and eliminate violence. I think almost all of us know the study that was done. It was actually talked about in the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? Where some of the transcendental meditation people went to Washington, D.C. for the express purpose of reducing the crime rate in the city. And they went there and talked to the police chief about that. We're going to sit here and we're going to meditate, and the crime rate will go down through our meditation efforts. And the police chief said to them, the only thing that will lower the crime rate in Washington, D.C. in July is a snowstorm. Well, they start meditating in July, and the crime rate went down by 25% through their meditation. Now, this gets to the question, though, why they stop. If we know we can do this, why don't we just keep on doing it? If we know that our consciousness energy can do something like this, then why aren't we doing it? I think that we can end suicide. And a number of you have heard me talk about, and a number of you have seen my TED Talk, where we look at how ubiquitous suicide is in our society, but how much we don't talk about it. As of right now, the number of deaths in the United States due to the coronavirus comes out to about 2 people per day. That's the number of people who have died from the coronavirus. The number of people who committed suicide over the same length of time is 130 people per day. Now, I'm not saying the coronavirus is not important. I'm saying there's something many, many more times important, and we simply don't talk about it. If we didn't talk about the coronavirus the same way we don't talk about suicide, we'd never hear about it. People would be going around cough, cough, sniffle, sniffle, dropping dead, and it's like, oh, well, these are just all personal tragedies. I believe through consciousness energy, we can end suicide. Now, there's no one in the government or wanting to get into the government that has ever said a word about suicide. Trump's never talked about it. Biden's never talked about it. All the other candidates that dropped out, no one talked about it. It is the elephant that sits in the room, sitting on 130 people a day, and we don't do anything about it and go completely crazy because the media feeds us coronavirus. I think both of these things are important. I'm not with the folks that are saying, oh, let's go out and party because this isn't important. No, I think we should treat everything important. Both of these things is important. I'm washing my hands a lot more than I've washed them before. I meant to move them. I've got my N95 masks sitting by the door, and every time I walk out the door, I check in with my intuition and I say, should I be wearing this? Do I need to wear this today? My intuition has been consistently saying, no, you don't need to wear this. Now, once we develop a group consciousness, not just my consciousness and then yours. Once we have a group consciousness, we'll be able to see things differently. And by seeing things differently, we'll be able to do some of these things here. I think that we can spread a consciousness of peace and oneness the same way that the fear machine, the news, fears separation and violence. I think that we can drive out our demons. And some of us are not near major cities, but if you're in a city even the size of Portland, you know what I'm talking about. You know the people who are walking around, talking to themselves, screaming, in pain, and the pain is all inside their psyche. We want to have a shorthand way of dismissing them. Oh, they're just on drugs. Oh, they're just, mentally ill, and we just need to have more mental health counseling, and then I can go back to forgetting this as a problem. And none of those things work. What we need to do is look at this in a completely different way. And the different way we need to look at this is just like in biblical times, people had demons that Jesus was driving out of them through consciousness energy, through the Christ energy. The people in our times are holding that energy because we haven't spread the consciousness of peace and love and peace and oneness. We haven't spread the consciousness that allows us to develop enough consciousness energy to drive those demons out of them. We can get rid of our shadows and we can spread our light. And for those of you who participated in releasing the shadows, spreading the light, you know what I'm talking about. And for everyone else, you'll have to figure that out at some other point in time, because we're not going to go there right now. We can spread measurable fulfillment the way that we spread measurable economics. We have this completely elaborate system of stock markets, etc., to keep track of money. What if we had the same operation to keep track of our happiness, to see where our happiness was, see where our happiness is not, and to actually do something about this? Most of us know about the country of Bhutan that has a gross happiness index instead of a gross domestic product. And happiness being much more important to them than economics. This is the kind of thing that we need desperately. And government, as it is presently constituted, will never, ever, ever, ever give it to us. That doesn't mean we don't get it. It's just that we have to give it to ourselves. So, and we can survive the transition that is either coming or on us right now. This might be the transition point that we're in right now. So let me ask you a question. What do you believe a functional human consciousness can do? What do you believe a functional human consciousness should do? What do you believe a functional human consciousness should not do? Okay, let me give you one answer to that question. I don't believe that a functional human consciousness should be telling people how to think. We don't need Big Brother. We need something else. And you, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, get to work on that, get to start answering those questions. But I'm seeing that it says 2 people have raised their hand, but I don't see any hands raised. Can you re-raise your hand, please? And I don't see hands going up. So I see one hand going up. And so this is Niaria, and I'm going to unmute you. And if you can turn your video on, let's get to your question. So you are unmuted now. I can hear you. If you want to turn your video on, you don't have to, but I'd like to see who I'm talking to.
I don't want to touch any button for the fact I might lose you or you lose.
Okay.
This is my first time with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so all this information are new to me and I haven't had a time to think.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand that consciousness is first I should have of my own. I should be conscious first.
Mm-hmm.
So then I'll be able to direct it out there, to share, to make it functional. That's how I feel right now.
Mm-hmm. I will share something with you. And I don't know if you have children, but when you have a child, you don't say to the child, well, I'm going to wait until you develop the faculty for talking and before I start talking to you, because it's a waste of time talking to somebody who can't understand. You don't do that. What you do is you talk to that kid and you keep talking and talking, and guess what? There's this mirror connection. The baby starts trying to talk. And the first things that come out are blah, 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 and you just encourage the child to do more and more and more. And then finally, they turn what, 3 years old, and they're running their mouth to the point that you wish you could, there was an off switch. That was just a joke. But just the way that you develop that child's consciousness, language ability, that's the same way that you develop the child's consciousness, okay? And same way you develop your consciousness. So it's not you sitting in a room staring at your navel trying to develop consciousness energy. It's you going Fred Myers and looking people in the eye and doing that to the point you get overwhelmed and say, okay, I'm done with that for the day. I'll be back here tomorrow and I'm going to spend some more time doing that. Where I can walk down the street and again, make the eye contact with people. And every time I do that, this is a trip to the gym. And you know what happens when you go to the gym? You get stronger. You're not as strong as the strongest person up there bench pressing 5,000 pounds or anything like that. But you will get stronger. Okay, does that respond to your
I think it makes sense now.
Okay.
I think I've figured out how I'm going to be functional with my
yeah.
consciousness. Thank you.
Yep. Hopefully in the next 10, 15 minutes, they'll be even more functional here. So was there another hand that went up? I saw that there were 2 hands that had gone up and I'm not seeing anyone. And so let me now go to the breakout rooms. And the way we're going to do this, we're going to do 5 rooms. I'm going to do the breakout. And I'm going to ask some people not to go to the breakout room, okay? And those people that I'm asking because when you stay here, we're going to make a breakout room of the whole, okay? When you go into breakout rooms, the breakout rooms are never recorded, which means that if somebody's looking at the recording, there's just this blank spot on the recording. And so that there won't be a blank spot, there'll be people who will have oops, I'm talking and counting at the same time. I don't do well at either one of those things. So there'll be 3 or 4 of us that are actually that people will be able to see. So if I ask you to not go into your breakout room, what you're doing is your conversation will be visible to others. They'll be only the people I'm asking. And so right now, I'm going to ask Charlene, I'm going to ask Teresa, and I'm going to ask, and if I murder your name, I'm sorry, Porfirio, not to go into the breakout room when I push the button. There's just about 3 of you in each of the breakout rooms. So what I want you to do is go into your room as quickly as you can, as soon as I open the room, and they're not open yet. And when you go into the room, give your name, give your, kind of where you're located, and then get into the questions. I'm going to post the questions up on in the chat so that you will be able to get them, or I may actually just leave the screen up. That may be the simplest thing to do. So you're going to have 6 minutes, and I'm going to time you for you to talk, and that will give you I think enough time for a couple of minutes each. Okay, so I'm opening the rooms and off you go. And so if you can go and join your rooms, except for Porfirio and Charlene and Teresa. And I'm going to invite you to open your videos and turn on and unmute yourselves and get into a conversation here. So I see it's the 4 of us. It worked. It worked. I'm always pleased when something like that actually happens. So yes. Excuse me for not joining your group. Oh, and Joseph is joining you because he was unassigned. I didn't see you up there. Sorry. Did you just sign in or something? I can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, went off for a moment, came back on. Sorry.
Okay, so you got 4 in your group. I'm going to move myself out so that you can talk.
Shariff, are you going to put the questions up on the screen or in the chat?
Okay, you're muted, Shariff. The question was, what do you believe consciousness should do? I think you said can do, and I think you said should not do. So I think those were the 3 questions, and I'm sorry, we can't see them either. Anybody want to go first? Okay, I'll go first. I'm thinking there's just so much more to consciousness than most of us really even consider, you know, and I've been involved with a group of people that have been doing remote viewing. These are people that'll view the future, they'll view the past. Okay, so that's one thing. You know, your consciousness could maybe even move things around. But getting to, you know, what's best for all, what we should be, I guess, probably doing, I hope that's what he's going to get to, is viewing, setting an intention for what you want to see happen. Setting a very clear intention if you want to end suicide, or if you want to, you know, end the coronavirus, you know, make it work out for everybody. You know, set your intention and then meditate it on it. Joseph, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm glad you used that word intention. From a Buddhist perspective, whenever you do a meditation, you start out with setting your intention. So yeah, I think that's a crucial part, extremely important part, to being clear about what the intention is.
Yeah. Charlene?
Yeah, I'm right there with both you, Teresa and Joseph. And I think about my own, I've never referred to it this way, but own consciousness practice. Consciousness should be at all times, and yet I still set aside time to be conscious. And we need to get to a different level and set our intention at a higher level so that we can solve the problems that we have in our world. And I do believe that what's going on now with the coronavirus is giving us all a collective pause, right? A collective pause to really set that intention and be more conscious. So, yeah.
Porfirio?
I agree with what you are all saying. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great, because I have my headphones on, but it's good that it's working this way. I think we need to remember that at the basis of everything, that we are energy beings of love. And right now, when everyone wants to think about fear, that's not the direction you want to go to, because basically there's only 2 paths, fear or love. And so the more that we set our intention to love and beam that out, remember that our energy doesn't stop at the border of the country or the city or the state. It goes all around the world. So the more we are synchronized with other people, other energy beings doing that same intention of love and healing for the planet and stopping of the coronavirus, I think that will just raise the vibration which Shariff was talking about, and then creates that immunity bubble, kind of like the 100th monkey approach, that eventually everybody gets it.
Yeah.
Right.
That I'm complete.
Well, I think what you just said is, it kind of goes back to, you know, we're all one in consciousness, right?
Yep.
Right? So,
Exactly.
Joseph, we're all one. We tend to forget that because we're living in this human existence and we weren't taught we were one. But if you believe we're all one, then you want what's best for everybody.
Right. Well, you know, it's helpful to remind people, like if you look at a pool, a swimming pool, and you look at just one little droplet of the water, or the same similarity, the analogy with the ocean, where the wave, how can I be in tune and in alignment with the ocean? Well, you are, you know, you align yourself with the wave, with the ocean, and you'll set that intention. Have the force of the ocean behind you, the source that you are of all the oneness. And you said something very important, Teresa, which is most people think about themselves separate. But if they were to see a couple of different examples where your thoughts move a physical body, or not a physical body, but like physical rods, copper rods, like the dowsing. I've done that experiment with my nephew, and I didn't know how powerful it was for him until the day of his wedding. He was telling me, "Hey, Uncle, you know, I want to thank you. You know, probably the most impactful thing was when you did that demonstration for me." Oh, really? Because he took that and he applied it to the rest of his life. Because if your thoughts are powerful to be able to move something that's physical, you can do a lot more than what we were taught. And it goes back to, it's like we weren't taught about our energy body. So it's like an airplane without one wing. We've only been taught about one, how to move around in the world with just our physical body. Whereas if we knew that we had a physical and an energetic spirit being, oh, we could do a lot much more if we all knew about that. Now I'm complete.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
You know, on a very direct, simple level, we can just look at our own body. Our thoughts, as we all know, our thoughts very dramatically affect our state of health. You know, as far as like positive thoughts, how they cause these mood elevator hormones to be secreted, and negative thoughts and thoughts of fear create a lot of destruction in the body. And it's just a loop. The more we get into destructive thoughts and negative thoughts, the more depressed we become, and it's like a cycle that just continues. I mean, that's a very simple example to look at how consciousness affects us.
Well, even in my case, I know all these things, and yet, you know, there's times when I devolve down into a negative thought, or I hear something, I'm like, ah, you know.
Oh, yeah,
So I guess that's all sort of part of being a human at this time.
Yeah, I hear you. It's we have to practice at all times. I think that's what's really brought,
Yeah.
you know, what's going on in the world today is really resonating with me, is at all times.
There's something that we can be reminded of. There was a class called The Science of Self-Empowerment that was offered, I think, last year, and I was lucky enough to attend. But when we have those breakdown moments when we're human, it helps to just like put on a pause button and do that deep breathing to slow everything down. And then you can kind of center yourself and get back to being the spirit body that you really are.
Yeah.
And here comes everybody else. I am going to ask you to stay with me for a bit. And I'm going to, obviously, you've had rich conversations. And if you would like to, if we shared everybody, then there wouldn't be any more presentation today. let's take a couple of minutes. If there were 2 or 3 of you who heard something or said something that you think the rest of the group would appreciate, let's get your comments. And I'm going to actually make sure I open the windows. They've got 6 people who are not on video right now. And so if somebody who's not on video wants to get on video or get turn their audio on or raise their hand or whatever they want to do. I don't see any hands going up digitally. I don't see any hands going up in person. I don't see any meat hands waving around except my own. I guess we're ready to go to the next section. Although some folks say I don't wait long enough for shy people. So okay, Barbara, turn your audio on.
Hi there. Okay, so I had a group with 2 really fascinating women, and one, let's see if I can find them on the Neria and Colleen. Although I don't see them on the list, but anyway, we had a discussion. What we talked about was how we would not have chosen what was going on in our lives right now, but because this is what we have, it kind of forces us to reassess and go within and, to find time to meditate and gain perspective. And I think a lot of people, we're finding a lot of people after the initial frenzy are doing things like that to just really connect other ways and find gratitude, find reasons to be happy for what we've got and gratitude, etc. So make the best of it and make it better than what it was.
One of the things that I've heard in almost all of the crises that I've had I've had the, I guess I should say, honor to experience around the world is that people solve problems a lot better than anything and everyone else, okay? And the number of people who said, I'm thinking particularly about the situation in Argentina back in 2000, where the economy didn't tank, it literally disappeared overnight. So just think about what happened to them. All the money that you've got in the bank right now disappears. It's gone, and it's gone forever. It doesn't come back, okay? What do? All the money that you've got in the world is what you've got in cash in your pocket right now. Well, what they did was survive, and they survived by some really amazing means of people really, really pulling together. Now, there are some people who are really, really pulling apart. They're really pulling in the opposite direction. But people ignored them. It's kind of like, oh, well, we will form a community and we will do this. What we're doing is highlighting all the people who are pulling apart in our crisis and spending no time on the people who are literally, consciously saying, this is an opportunity for us to really shift our gears. Unless there's another hand, I'm itching to get to the next part here. So you want to not have me itching. And the next part I want to get to is our conclusions. So if you can go ahead and start both muting and turning off your video, we'll get back into presentation mode here. And I see almost all of them are gone. Okay. And I will share with you what I got here. And so remember I said the first thing I'm going to do is share with you my conclusions. And the reason I want to do that is in case I don't get a chance to get to them. So some of these you're going to say, yeah, of course. But for most people, this is a stretch. All is alive. Everything is alive. Life is everywhere. It may not be life that you can understand. Okay, it may not be life that you can experience, but everything is alive. And people have said, well, how can that rock that's just sitting there be alive? We have to remember, to a hummingbird, we're a rock. And somebody says, oh, how could that Shariff be alive? It just sits there. I'm flying all around and it's just sitting there. So that is, all is alive. All is conscious. All has consciousness at some level. All is connected. My consciousness is connected to your consciousness. My consciousness right now is connected to the person that's walking down my street, although I can't see them and they can't see me. My consciousness is connected to someone in Africa on the other side of the planet that I've never met before. We're all connected. Mind, what we call mind, is all pervasive. It's not located, it's not locked in this skull and you got a mind over there that's locked in your skull. It's all pervasive. Consciousness is universal. It's not just a human construct. And this is the big one that I'll spend a lot of time talking about. The laws of physics bend toward consciousness. The laws of physics actually shift and change based on the consciousness that we have. For those of you who know about quantum physics, I won't be talking about that today, although I would love to. It's really a fascinating subject. But we see how, if you know about it, you know that the observer changes the physical effects of the observed. And we'll just pause a moment to either mourn or not mourn poor Schrodinger's cat, who's either dead or not dead. Okay, so and if you have no idea what I'm talking about with that, that's fine. So I have my own conclusions here. All beings have consciousness, including humans. This is the way that indigenous people see the world, okay? So consciousness is a universal construct, not just something for human beings. All indigenous cultures, and I will be referring to them from now on as the keepers. And the reason I call them the keepers is that's what I call them in my book, Creating a World That Works for All. And the reason I'm waving this book around is that you should buy it. And sometime before we're gone, I will put the button for you to be able to get to the Commonway store to get the 2 books I'll be talking about. That was one of them that I was waving around. So you can find out what I mean by the 3 cultures that are on our planet right now. The keepers being indigenous people, the breakers being the people who have run our planet into the ground or run our planet into transformation. And then the menders, those of us who are going to fix all the problems. So breaker science, the science, the modern science that we've got, is based on concepts. And the concepts are individuality, separation, and death. When Rupert Sheldrake, and we'll be talking about Rupert more in about 2 minutes, when Rupert Sheldrake was said he was interested in biology, so he went to school for it, and so the first thing they did was give him a dead frog. And he says, I don't want to know about dead frogs, I want to know about living systems. And there's nothing that teaches you about living systems. When you go to medical school, the first thing to do is give you a dead body. So, but keeper and mender science is based on inclusivity and holistic thinking. And this is taking holistic thinking to the next level. So practicing inclusivity will create and accelerate a collective consciousness, a group mind. This is what I'm calling the blended consciousness. And I'll tell you where I got that from. So blending the breaker consciousness and the keeper consciousness forms the consciousness that will be crucial to human survival. That is the consciousness that can say to the carbon in the atmosphere, please come down, and it will come down. So blended consciousness will serve as the basis of the third global civilization. Now, I'm doubting very seriously if I'm going to get a chance to talk about the third global civilization. We're in the second right now, and I have a lot to say about the first. But time may prevent that from happening. So I just want you to know that this isn't a matter of reforming the political structure or anything like that. We are really in the process of birthing something brand new that the world hasn't seen before. And this is an amazingly exciting time for all of us. It's fear generating for a lot of people, because if you want what you've always had, well, you're not going to have that anymore. I'm sorry. You're going to have a lot better. And we can open ourselves to that. And the fifth form of energy, Force X, I'm pretty sure we won't get to that today, but hey, miracles happen. We'll stretch time and we'll see where we get. Okay, so I want to talk to you about consciousness. Arthur Koestler wrote a book called, wrote a bunch of books. The one I'm talking about in particular called The Roots of Coincidence, where he looks at the notion of what is chance. I take a coin and I flip it, and it lands, and it's going to land either heads or tails. I flip it again, it's going to be heads or tails. Flip it again, it's heads or tails. But we know that if we flip it enough, the heads and tails equal themselves out. If you flip the coin 10,000 times, it's going to be really, really close to 5,000 heads and 5,000 tails. Okay. So he flipped a different coin. He flipped, he created a random number generator, which is exactly what it says it is. It creates a random number. And he generated 10,000 numbers. Now, the laws of chance, the laws of coincidence, the laws of averages say there should be about 5,000 even numbers and 5,000 odd numbers. So he runs the experiment, he looks at the numbers, he has 5,000 even, 5,000 odd. He takes those numbers, takes the random number generator and hooks it up to a heat lamp. So if the number it generates is even, the lamp comes on. If the number is odd, the lamp goes off. He runs it through 10,000 numbers. Half the time the lamp is on, the other half the time the lamp is off. Okay, this is all inside the laws of what we would call the laws of physics, the laws of chance, of coincidence, etc. He then takes a tray of baby chickens and puts it in front of the heat lamp. He runs the random number generator again and generates 10,000 numbers. The lamp stays on way longer than 50-50. Now, he looks at the actual numbers, make sure there's no error. The random number generator is generating more even numbers. He takes the baby chickens away, runs it through another 10,000 numbers. It goes right back to 50-50, which means that baby chickens are a lot smarter than you give them credit for, or it means there is some other mechanism at work that wants the cute little fuzzy baby chickens to stay warm. So because Koestler was a good scientist, he said, I don't know if it's the chickens that are affecting the random number generator, or whether it's me doing that because I want the cute little fuzzy baby chickens to stay warm. So he, as a good experimenter, he creates a double-blind experiment, meaning he won't know what's in front of the heat lamp. So he gets a tray of fertile eggs. These are eggs that are about to hatch. And then he gets a tray of hard-boiled eggs, which are very difficult to hatch. I hope nobody's tried that. And he has tray A and tray B. And then he has an accomplice who doesn't know that there's a difference between these eggs. Nothing is in front of the random number generator. It's at 50-50. The lamp is half on and half off. You put the hard-boiled eggs in front of the heat lamp and run the random number generator for another 10,000 numbers, and it's still at 50-50. You put the tray of fertile eggs in front of the heat lamp, and the heat lamp stays on way longer than the 50-50 average. So that means that fertile eggs are a lot smarter than you give them credit for because they can affect random number generators. Or it means there's something else involved. And that something else, the force that can change the outcome of a random number generator, is what I call force X. Now, I'm kind of like Benjamin Franklin with the kite and the key. I don't quite know what I've got, but I know I've got something, and I know that if we really understand this, we can make this useful. So, while I have the screen up, I can't see the participants because I'd want to ask, I can. If you can put your hand up, if you know about Rupert Sheldrake, and especially this particular book, Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. Okay, I see 2, 3, and I see a meat hand running. I see a couple of meat hands. Okay, so a number of you already know about Sheldrake and the Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. This is a very important experiment. He says that, and somebody just turned their audio on, so if you could turn it off, that'd be great. People who own dogs regularly report that when they walk in the door, the dog is sitting at the front door waiting for them. Now, the dog doesn't sit there all day. And there's lots of theories on why this happens this way. That the dog habituates to a particular time you come home. The dog hears the sound of your car and knows that that's your car and goes to the door. And Sheldrake, being a very careful scientist, and I use that word carefully because there are a lot of folks on all sides of the debate that stop doing science and start doing throwing facts at each other that are not really facts and not testable. So Sheldrake is a careful scientist, and so he got a bunch of people who had dogs and also had flexible schedules that wanted to participate in the experiment. And he would have he set up a camera at the front door so he could see whether the dog was sitting there, and set up a camera a couple of places in the house to see what the dog was doing when the owner isn't there. And so, the dog is watching TV, or the dog goes to the kitchen, makes himself a sandwich, whatever dogs do when your owners are not there. And so he would say to these people, I want you to, at various times, I want you to intend to go home and then go home. And as soon as he said, as soon as he told the person to intend to go home, the dog stops doing whatever it's doing and goes to the front door and starts waiting, regardless of time. Second level of the experiment, he says to the person, I do not want you to go home now. So you're not going home, but you're going to go around town and follow my directions. And so he's taking the person, turn left here, turn right there, etc. And he has the person, by following those instructions, drive right past their front door. The dog doesn't blink because the dog isn't listening to the sound of the motor of the car. So he drives him a mile away, and then he says, okay, now I want you to intend to go home, and then go home. And as soon as he says that to the person, the dog gets up off the sofa and goes to the front door. This is really, really powerful stuff, okay? And there's something that's happening there, and we're going to test that something a little further. I'm going to have to go a lot faster than I'm thinking I'm going right now. He did the same thing with parrots and dreams. That parrots, because they can talk, can tell you what they were dreaming. And for many parrots, they were dreaming, the parrots would dream, and the parrots would dream the dream of the owner, okay? So if the owner was dreaming about a particular person, the parrot would say, Pete, 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 and that was the person they were thinking about. Or the owner was thinking of a blue balloon. The parrot wakes up and says, blue balloon, blue balloon. So there are these connections. He also wrote another really powerful book called The Sense of Being Stared At. I don't even have to ask for a show of hands. Almost everybody reports that at some point in time in their lives, they feel like they've been stared at. They will turn to look at the person that they think is staring at them and find that person looking away from them suddenly. The power of your vision, and this is what I was talking about, going to Fred Meyer's and lighting the place up, okay? There's something in that connection that will that turns on the light in that person. Okay. This is a really wild experiment. This is another one on consciousness and randomness. The stars of this experiment is, yes, maybe baby. We need more baby chick consciousness in the world, and a red balloon. So as you know, as I think most of you know, that chickens, as most fowl, will entrain with, will follow what the first thing they see as their mother. So if the first thing they see is their mother chicken, then everything is fine. But in this case, the researchers had the baby chickens from the time they were hatched entrained with a red balloon. So wherever the red balloon was, the chickens would just follow it around. They took the balloon and put it on a little cart, and the cart had two randomizers on it. So one of the randomizers would pick a random direction, just a direction somewhere, 360-degree direction. And the second randomizer would tell it to go anywhere from 1 inch to 3 feet. So it gets a signal, it chooses a direction on its own, and it chooses a length of time on its own, a distance on its own, and it goes that way, and then goes that way, and then goes that way. Now, while this is going on, the baby chicks are all around it. So when the cart takes off that way, all the chicks follow it. Cart takes off that way, all the chicks follow it. It creates a random pattern. So this is the first pattern that the baby chicks follow. If you can see my marker, the cart starts right there. and it goes this way, that way, and the other way. And all the ways that it's going, all the baby chicks are following it. Okay, so that's the first part. Second part, they take all the little baby chicks and they put them in this cage, and they make this a glass wall. So the baby chicks can see the red balloon. The baby chicks cannot interact with the red balloon. They can't get to it. They then have the red cart do what it did before, pick a random direction and then a random distance for the direction. And they got a different pattern. And the pattern they got was this, that when the baby chicks are over here, that red balloon does everything it can do to get into this cage with these chicks. Which means that red balloons are a lot smarter than you give them credit for, because there's nothing else that explains this. We can think about this in terms of the magnetic quality of love, that this cart starts this way and moves away from the cage, and then everything else it does is trying to get to this cage. This line is kind of important. It goes way, way away for a second to try to see if there's some other entrance, because that balloon wants to get into that cage, or those chicks want their mother. Okay, so this is the difference between a random pattern and a consciousness directed pattern, even though the consciousness was not the consciousness of the of a human being. Okay, I am going to pause now because I'm in the process of dumping. I need to figure some slides I need to dump. And then, but I'm going to ask you if you have any questions or comments or thoughts to raise your digital hand or raise your meat hand, and let's have at it. I'm not seeing any hands going up. I'm not seeing any screens popping on. So let's go into our next, given our time, I'm going to, okay, I see a hand. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in again, and just to let you and everybody else know that we had a feeling that you have so much material you wouldn't be able to do it all in one day. So we definitely will have you back to do maybe part 2 of this presentation. So there's so much more, but if we can't get to it today, it will be presented at another time.
Wait, there's more. Double your order. Excellent. Yes. So let me do this relatively quickly. And this is looking at megalithic structures. And what I mean by that is like really, really, really big things. And this again is a way of looking at the results of force X, whatever force X may be. So this is the largest stone that's been moved in modern times. The stone is right there, and it's in this contraption. The trailer is close to 300 feet long, 206 wheels, 6 trucks are pulling this thing. And the maximum speed is 8 miles an hour. And it took them 11 days to move this rock from where it was somewhere in the desert until to get it to Los Angeles, where it's part of an art installation right now. This is the art installation. So people walk down this tunnel and you stand here and are impressed by having 340 tons floating above your head, okay? From this view, you could see somebody down here and see somebody walking toward it or away from it there. Up to 15 people can stand under that stone at any given point in time. This stone is now in the Guinness Book of World Records for the largest stone ever moved in modern times. Now, this is 340 tons. This is 1,650 tons. It's called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It's 5 times the Los Angeles stone. While 15 people will fit under the Los Angeles stone, this is over 200 people sitting, standing, cavorting on this one stone. And how did this thing get cut and moved? All of the theories that we have on how people did things like this in those days simply don't make sense. You can't get that much muscle power to move 1,650 tons when it took this 206-wheel vehicle at 8 miles an hour, 11 days to move a 340-ton stone. And the really wild thing about all this is that ain't the biggest stone that's out there. Each of these is about 1,200 tons. How they get up there? How they actually, after they get it to the site, which is from miles away, how they get it up there? This might be the biggest megalithic stone ever at 3,000 tons. How did they cut this thing? How do you move 3,000 tons? They think that they found bigger stones, but the geologists are saying these are natural formations. These are not cut stones. And their argument is it can't be a cut stone because nobody could move anything that big. What if we did turn the argument around? Somebody did this, okay? I will try to go back for a second. Somebody did this. You know, nature doesn't create rectangular stones. Nature doesn't create right angles, okay? And so this is a powerful statement of, you know, there is a force X. Let's look and see what it does. Okay, and it's going to talk about Göbekli Tepe, but I'm not, because we're so much running out of time, and I do want to get to some more of the. Oh, okay. This is very key to everything that I'm talking about here. So let's go here. Oh, let me ask really quick if any other questions. Yet I'm taking meat hands. I'm taking digital hands. I don't see any. Keep them down. Let's go to the next section. Sharing with you again. Actually, I won't. I'll stay here. I want to talk to you about something that happened to me some years ago. I was in, I got called to the Himalayas and got called to a cave in the Himalayas. So I was at the 15,000 foot level, trying to breathe, which is always interesting. I was in a cave away from all human beings. There's not a human being within 10 miles in any direction And in that space, I had a revelation. I had a download. And as for those of you who know me, I either don't have a religious practice, or I have all religious practices. They are all the same. It all goes the same way. I've read every holy book that I can get my hands on. They all say the same thing. They're saying the same thing in different ways. And my revelation, I went on this journey for a particular reason. And I wanted to know the seeds, or the way that you do sacred civilization. Civilizations that are based on spiritual practice, civilizations that can do things like move stones or be in direct communion with the divine, etc. And the revelation I got was that I was barking up the wrong tree. The revelation I got said that the powers that I was looking for resides in human beings. There's not the magic pen that you wave and then you get magic powers, or there's not a special incantation in a book that if you read it, then all of a sudden, you know, things will start happening. I could let go of my Indiana Jones, looking for the sacred object that's going to have all these magical powers. So what I was told in the cave, that these powers reside in human beings, but the powers reside in human beings that are not disconnected from each other. That the powers are residing in human beings that are connected to each other and who have blended their consciousness. And the revelation said, I need to be focused on, and I need to be starting people on the process of blending their consciousness. Let's look at what this blended consciousness looks like. Now I'll start sharing my page with you. So what can the consciousness do? Oh, I was on the Doak River. So I call this the Doak River Revelations. The key to this is the key to blended consciousness. We've been trying to do consciousness as individuals. Now it's time to shift that. Oh, and I'm at the wrong spot, and I'm going to correct this in 1 second. I'm going to talk about the 5 latent powers. These are latent powers that are inside of each one of us. Hang on. These are powers that are okay. In my zeal of trying to do this quickly, I did it wrong. So that's the right way of doing it. Okay. So the 5 latent powers. Number 1, collective telepathy and knowing. Number 2, spatial powers. Number 3, temporal powers. Number 4, communication powers. And then number 5, bodily powers. I'll go through these slower. So in terms of collective telepathy and knowing, this is the most important of these latent powers. All human beings can access the knowing capacity of all other human beings and other beings and other species. We have lots and lots of names for these. The Akashic records, the ancestral trail, the lots of things. It doesn't matter. It's just it's a way that all of us can know everything. It's not restricted by distance, not restricted by time, not restricted by culture, not restricted by language. It's in force X, so it has no restrictions. The ancient Holons, and by Holons, I'm referring to people who live in a holistic relationship with themselves and with their environment and with all other beings. I'm talking about the keepers. The keepers didn't live in fear and scarcity. They knew how to talk to the life field. They were constantly in communication with the life field, and the life field was in constant support for them. So this collective telepathy and knowing includes a group telepathy, and a group can be as large as an entire society, as large as an entire country. It can't be but too small. It's not like 2 or 3 individuals. Group knowing, consciousness, mental influencing. I can send my consciousness and influence others. Consciousness shifting. How many indigenous groups, how many keeper groups talk about exchanging their consciousness for the consciousness of the eagle, exchanging their consciousness for the consciousness of the kangaroo, exchanging their consciousness for the consciousness of the salmon. Their names for themselves are the people of the caribou, the people of the salmon, the people of the polar bear, the people that their name for themselves is also the name that they have for the beings that they most readily shift with. Consciousness transfer, which is shape-shifting, which they take on other bodies. They can turn into these other beings to experience them. Communication via transcendence, meaning I'm talking to you right now. The communication goes through these wires, but I can also talk to you and have none of this electronic stuff on. And if we are sharing blended consciousness, we can hear each other. Okay, so second is spatial powers, that I'm able to catalyze an action at a distance. That means transportation, moving from one location to another at great speed without any time interval, or without any time interval. Like if I want to be in the Himalayas, I can be in the Himalayas. If I want to be in, if I want to go to Los Angeles and walk it in a day, I can walk it in a day. There's lots of evidence of this, of keepers saying this. And of course, the breakers just say, these are old wives' tales. No one, since we can't do it, no one can do it. That's an important point. Navigation, being able to cross vast distances while knowing their destination. The Polynesians were and are famous for being able to go to the next island over, one they've never been to, one that's below the horizon. You cannot see that island, and they go straight there. They only put enough provisions in their canoe to get them to that island. They don't have to have any more because they know exactly where they're going. They just know it. Translocation, having your consciousness in a different position or location than where your body is. I would ask for a show of hands, but I can't get to that screen right now, of how many of you have had the experience, or you know someone who has had the experience of having their consciousness in one spot and their body in another spot. This happens a lot in traumatic times when, like for example, your child is in danger or something like that, and you're right where that child is, although they may be hundreds of miles away. Or you're having an operation and you go under anesthesia, and immediately you pop to the ceiling of the room, and you can tell the surgeon and everybody else exactly what happens in that room while you are under anesthesia and not able to hear anything. Bilocation, and this is one I want to develop, being in 2 or more distinct locations at the same time. So while I'm talking to you here, I could also be in India, or I can be in Europe, or I could be anywhere else. Object moving and manipulation, for example, cutting and moving those megalithic stones. I don't know the exact technique, but I know that force X is the way that you do that. That whatever this force X is, it's more powerful than gravity. And gravity is one of the most ubiquitous forces that we experience. Object sensing, seeing and knowing objects from a distance. We call this remote viewing or non-local viewing. And this is one of the few things that ION spends an awful lot of time on, and I think spends an inordinate amount of time on. It's like when I start looking for a functional consciousness, it doesn't really matter to me whether or not you can sense the building dimensions of the building that's directly across the street from me. So what? I want, when I'm looking at functional consciousness, it's like, how can I do something like that with this? Like call down the carbon, like tell the coronavirus to behave itself, etc. Locating food sources. Again, indigenous people are, well, those of us who are trained as breakers, which means all of us, we're taught that, oh, food is always so scarce and they're always trying to find the food. No, the food is coming right to them and they're going right to their food, as long as no one is breaking their relationship to the natural cycle. As soon as you break the relationship, of course, you know, keepers along with everybody else start starving because you broke the relationship. And then weather control, which would be nice at certain times. The third factor is temporal powers, time shifting, and I'm starting to get kind of good at this. Speeding up or slowing down time, I'm getting to the point that I can do this on my own. Stopping time altogether, I haven't gotten there yet. Jumping time. Now, sometimes time jumps for me inadvertently. I'm not trying to make this happen, and all of a sudden I find myself in another time, like several hours have gone by, or several hours, or I think several hours have gone by and they haven't gone by. It's like a quick shift. Then shifting to alternate narratives or stories or realities. Okay, in the reality that I'm in right now, I'm wearing a light blue shirt and a darker blue sweater. When you shift to a different narrative, I could be wearing a green shirt and a purple sweater. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, things are slightly different now. Things are happening differently to me. Things appear in this reality that did not appear in the prior reality. Things disappear from this reality. And I've had these experiences without causing them to happen. I would love to be able to have a little bit more control over that. Temporal forecasting, having an oracle or doing fortune telling. How many of you have done astrology, tarot? I've gone to someone who looks into your future, etc. This is not talked about in most religions, and most religions have people who do that. Just that we kind of act like we don't. Fourth level is communication powers, nonverbal communication with other aspects of self, nonverbal communication with other human beings with or without bodies, people who regularly talk about talking to their ancestors, talking to the spirits, and people who come from traditions where you regularly communicate with your ancestors. Communication with transcendent beings, gods, goddesses, avatars, communication with other earth beings. Not domestic. We need to stop thinking about domestication in that this being exists for me. I own this being. You can't own a being, okay? You can have a partnership with that being, and that partnership can include food, okay, which is a story we won't get to because we're getting really close to our 6 o'clock hour. I'm going to ask you a question. Communication with either your past self or a future self, with other beings, or perhaps even other worlds, beings from other worlds. And then the last one is bodily powers. Changing your heart rate, changing your respiration, etc. I think that this is like the least of the powers. And it's also the one that's been studied the most. There's lots of things where they hook yogis up to monitors, and they can come close to stopping their heart completely, stopping their respiration for an hour. One time there's a Buddhist monk who he sat out in the snow to meditate, and he melted all the snow around him for a 25-foot circle while he's having a ball in the middle. And then the work of my friend Larry Dossey, who talks about the power of prayer. Let me give you a very quick Larry Dossey experiment. There's a particular heart operation that has a very high incidence of success and a very low incident of complications. So they have a range of how long it takes for you to recover. And they know it takes about 6 weeks for you to fully recover from this operation. So Larry took the hundreds of people in the Bay Area that had this operation and just took the only thing he took was their first name. And he divided them up among a dozen different religious and consciousness organizations in the Bay Area. I think IONS was one of them. Some of them were like, you know, the Christians, the Buddhists, the Mormons, the Muslims, etc. And each group was told about the group that you had was, John is in need of prayer. Francis is in need of prayer. Mary is in need of prayer. They didn't say anything about the operation they had. They didn't say anything about even where they were or what their status was or anything like that. The group that was prayed for was fully recovered in 3 weeks, while it took, on regular circumstances, it took 3 weeks for full recovery. Excuse me. So, this is like, again, scientific, testable, that you have these kinds of powers. So I am now going to stop, and I'm going to ask for, oh shoot, no, I'm not going to do that. I'll read it to you, but I'm not going to go back to my screen. This is a quote from Max Planck. He is the father of quantum physics. This is like Mr. Quantum Physics. And he says, all matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Okay, so Max Planck, this quantum physicist, not a religious, particularly religious guy, sees sees an intelligent mind behind everything. This is not what some of the Christian fundamentalists talk about in terms of intelligent design. What they mean is a design that would justify their own way of looking at the world, okay? As opposed to just looking and seeing how all these things, the world is designed for humans. The world is also designed for raccoons. The world is also designed for paramecium. The world is also designed for eagles. It's like all beings. So when we talk about creating a world that works for all, we're talking about a world that actually works with and for all beings. Okay, folks, now is the time we get to make a few decisions. This is the time that we're supposed to stop. And Teresa, if you want to join me now, that would be good. I've still got some energy left. And so if you want to go a little further, I'm willing to do that. If for some reason, now remember when we were at Taberspace, you'd be ushering me out the door because we'd have to close up and fold up and put the chairs back and if you want to stick around through another part of this module, we can go through another part. If you want to just stick around, I can't hear you.
How long would the next module take?
How long do you want to take?
Well, we've never done this before.
Okay, so let's longer than 15 minutes and shorter than 30. Okay, so
let's do a show of hands with the group. How about that? Everybody want to go on video and maybe do a show of hands if we want to go another 15 or 30 minutes.
I see digital hands going up. I see meet hands going up. I'm seeing enough both digital and meet, okay, to go ahead and say, let's go another, I'll go another 30. And if people have to, for whatever reason, sign out, that's okay. I've got a couple of people who've already signed out who said, Porfirio said, need to leave soon, thank you. I have a 6 p.m. meeting elsewhere. So thank you for those who were able to stick around. And shall we keep going? Let me see what the...
yeah, we had several hands go up, and I'm guessing anybody who's still on is in to stay for the next module.
Right. If you do need to leave, please take care of yourself. I'm going to ask you to put your hands down for those of you who did your digital hand up, and let me, I know what we're going to do. Okay, so I want to. So we are talking about this combination of the knowledge and wisdom of the keepers and the knowledge and wisdom of the breakers, of bringing them together in a meaningful connection to create a super consciousness that's more powerful than either by themselves, and the kind of consciousness that can literally shift all of our thinking, shift all of our being. Now the problem with this is these two forms of consciousness need to support each other. And these two forms of consciousness need to respect each other. We have lots of examples of this around the world. there are lots of countries where, for example, the keeper medicine and the breaker medicine, the allopathic medicine, work hand in hand with each other. Where the keepers, and I've had a number of treatments in various places in the world from keeper medicine, and it's pretty powerful stuff. And they also know when you go to them with certain symptoms, they'll say, you need to go get an x-ray. You need to go get, you know, some antibiotics or whatever. You need to go to these doctors. And so the doctors will refer people back and forth because they respect each other. They respect what they can do. They also respect what they can't do. I want to give you an example of a group that was not, this is the opposite of respect. And this is a video that I think it's on Netflix. And so if you, if you have Netflix, you can look for this. It's a documentary called The Horse Boy. And I'm going to do a 2-hour documentary in 2 minutes. This couple had a child who was profoundly autistic. And you know, for those of you who have children or around children who are autistic, you know that can be a major handful. This child, and you know there's a range from mildly autistic to profoundly autistic, and he is more on the profound side. He would go into rages, and if you've never seen an autistic child in a rage, this is pretty powerful. Cannot be consoled. It's just they will stop when they want to stop. And the child, he was 8 years old, and he was still messing his pants. He was not potty trained at 8 years old. Again, for those of you who have children, an 8-year-old not potty trained gets really old really quick. So the parents had the idea that they were going to take this child. Oh, I'm sorry, I left out a detail. Child, for some reason, responded to horses. When there was a horse present, the little boy would perk up. He'd pay attention. He'd pay attention to the horse. His rages would either lessen or disappear. He had this relationship. So the parents decided, out of desperation, to take him to Mongolia, where they had lots of horses, and they also had lots of shamans. And they're thinking that maybe a shaman could help the boy at great expense. And oh, by the way, all this is being filmed by a crew, so these folks had money to do all this. So they go to Mongolia, and the people there said, "Oh, you want the reindeer people? The reindeer people can cure your son." So where are the reindeer people? It's like they follow the reindeer, so they could be that way, that way, that way. So they then start this odyssey of being in a van with a child going into rages and defecating his pants with no water around for weeks and weeks, looking for the reindeer people. They finally find the reindeer people, and the shaman will not see them. This is if you look at the video, this is an important point. They never see the shaman until the shaman is actually in his trance. So an emissary comes out from the shaman, and they tell the shaman what they want. And so the emissary goes back to the shaman and comes back to the people, and he says, yes, the shaman can heal your son, but we have to see if the shaman has permission to heal your son. So they come back tomorrow. So they come back, and the emissary comes out and says, yes, he has permission to heal your son. Bring your son by the tent tonight. So they bring the kid in. And the shaman does all the stuff that you expect shamans to do. He's rolling bones, he's got incense lit, he's blowing smoke everywhere. He's doing his shaman thing, okay? This is communication in a world that you don't inhabit, so you can't understand it. You can't understand any part of it unless you're in that world. When they walked into his tent, they walked off planet Earth into some other place. So after they did all that, they took the kid out. Emissary comes back out and says to the parents, the shaman healed your son last night. It may take you several weeks for you to see the results of it, so of his healing. But two things you'll notice right away. You'll notice that he won't go into rages anymore, and you'll notice that he won't crap his pants anymore. And the other things will come in slowly over time. They say thank you and drive away. And later that day, they're parked by a river, and this kid, for the first time in his life, pulls down his pants to take a crap. And the parents are so excited, they're telling all the camera crews, get the kid, get the film, get the cameras, he's taking a dump. Now, over the next couple of days, it looks like this kid, I mean, the kid has a look on his face like he's been really deeply asleep and he's just waking up. And there are other kids in this entourage that's been traveling around. For the first time, he is paying attention to the other kids in the entourage. For the first time, he's paying attention to the adults. When the kids are playing a game, it's like he wants to play also, okay? And this, compared to the kid that went over to Mongolia, this is like getting a brand new kid, okay? And saving a lot of money on diapers. So the director of this documentary asked the parents a question. They said, what do you think made the difference here? How did your son miraculously get healed? And both parents said, I don't know. The mother said, well, I think it's because we're spending more time together as a family. And the father said, I think it's because we're out here in the outdoors and nature, and we're around horses, and there just was this change. So what they did, even as they were the recipients of this medicine, is completely disregard and disrespect that medicine. And breakers have been doing that to keepers for the last, let's say, 1,000 years or so. The people who call themselves ethnobotanists will go into the Amazon rainforest and ask the shaman, which of these plants here will cure cancer? And the shaman, acting from a different perspective, will tell them, this isn't my information. This is information that's out in the universe. In fact, why are you even asking me? Why don't you consult the same beings I'm consulting? The shaman will say, oh yeah, this plant here, and you mix it with that one, and you boil them together, and that cures cancer. Now, the ethnobotanist says, thank you. They take that information, they take it to New York, they put it through a gene sequencer, they sequence the gene, then they claim it as their own intellectual property. They make several $1 billion on it and ignore the shaman back there who's trying to hang on to his ancestral homeland because somebody else wants to cut it down so that they can make a rubber plantation. So while people with breaker consciousness, that can be any or all of us, while people of breaker consciousness are taking the magic, they want the magic, and they're also going to tell you that there's no magic there. So the end of the Horseboy movie, at the end of the credits, they said the couple came back and they started a school for autistic children. The school has board certified psychotherapists. The school also has horses. The school does not have any shamans. The emissary said one last thing to the parents. He said, your son is a shaman, and you have to sew him his first shaman costume. You have to start raising him as a shaman. And as soon as they walked out of that tent, they blew all that off. Old wives' tales. We have no idea. We have no idea what that guy is talking about. Now, if the shaman had said, I can cure your son from crapping his pants, and I can cure your son from going in rages, but you got to pay me $20,000. They would have written the check so fast the ink wouldn't have been dry on it before they handed it to him. It's after the fact, after I've gotten the healing, after I've gotten the benefit, after I've robbed the treasury, I can then blow it all off. I can deny it. In fact, I have to deny it. If I don't deny it, I have to come to realize that I'm not living my life right. This is the reason why we go completely apeshit over the coronavirus and not say a single word about suicide. It's because we can't come to grips with suicide without coming to grips with the quality of our own lives, the societal quality of our own lives. We can't come to grips with suicide unless we come to grips with the fact that money doesn't work. Money is really great as a tool for balancing out value. It's a good medium for exchanging value, and that's all it is. It doesn't bring you anything except, you know, a car or a cup of tea or whatever. It doesn't bring you happiness. It doesn't bring you fulfillment. It doesn't bring you anything. And we can't say that as a society that is so wrapped up in that. Except I just said it. and I've been saying it. And I think that we need to continue the process of saying things like that. Okay, so what I want to do is share the different kinds of consciousness with you. And this, we're right on time. I'm going to stop in a few minutes, and I think we'll have time for a couple of questions. But let me get my screen up here. Okay, so the next steps in consciousness are blending consciousness. These two types of consciousness have been mutually separate and mutually exclusive, especially exclusive in this direction. The breakers have constantly denigrated the value of the societies that they've looked at. So the breaker consciousness is the consciousness of individuality. Each one of us has been taught, and each one of us is sitting here believing right now, believing right now that my consciousness is separate from yours. The keepers are the ones that see all of us as one. It's the difference between killer bees and colony bees. Colony bees are the ones that produce honey, and the killer bees don't really produce much of anything that's of value to the larger society. So the other thing that colony bees do is they are pollinators. The thing that they do regarding pollinization is so important. We could have entire crops die if they go away. They have two different kinds of reality. Breakers have space-time reality. Keepers have dream time reality. And dream time, there is no time. There's just gigantic now. And now can go back 30 or 40 or 50,000 years. And now can go 20 or 30 or 40,000 years into the future. Breaker consciousness is linear. History is progressive. We're smarter than those folks that came before that were wearing the feathers and hunting down buffalo, etc. We're smarter than that. Keepers recognize that that wisdom is everywhere, and so they're not particularly smarter than that if we've created a society that's painted itself into a corner. For breakers, reality is defined and constrained by consciousness, constrains consciousness. So my consciousness is an artifact. It's almost like an accident of the firing of neurons in my head. The keeper way of looking at things is that consciousness creates reality. And that consciousness is not just a reflection of human beings, but a reflection of all beings. The breakers believe the laws of physics are absolute and that there are limits to those laws of physics. For example, there's a limit on the speed of light. Light goes, the speed that it goes, 186,282 miles per second in a vacuum. I pulled that out of almost nowhere. The keeper view is that consciousness bends the laws of physics. So the speed of light may be slower or even faster, maybe even non-existent, depending on our consciousness. I just said that. So breakers are limited by 3 or 4 dimensions, length, width, height, those 3, and then maybe time as a 4th dimension. Keepers don't have dimensions, and there aren't any limits, and you're not limited by the 3 or 4 that you've got there. Breakers operate by cause and effect. Keepers operate by belief and manifestation. I believe that this is going to manifest, and therefore it manifests. Breakers believe that consciousness evolves from human evolution. Keepers believe that all life evolved, including human life, evolved from a universal consciousness. That universal consciousness being the infinite mind that Max Planck just talked about for us. Breakers believe only human beings have consciousness. Cats and dogs don't have consciousness. And it's only been in the last 100 years or so that breakers believed that I had consciousness, that Black people didn't have consciousness, women didn't have consciousness, only white males from Europe had consciousness. There's some that still believe that. Keepers believe that all life, all beings are sharing the same consciousness at one level or another. Breakers believe that consciousness is progressive, that your current consciousness is superior to your ancestors, the people who were just 100 years ago, we're superior to them. We recognize, the keepers recognize, that our ancestors had powers that current dominant consciousness does not. Remember the struggle to move the largest stone that anyone has ever moved in modern history, just only 340 tons. When you get up to 1,000 tons, when you get up to 1,600 tons, when you get up to 3,000 tons, the mind shuts off. Okay, so our job is to harmonize these 2 points of view. We need to, and I've been trying to train myself to think in both types of consciousness. It's like learning and operating out of two different languages. And all of this goes beyond language and beyond culture. And remember, my marching orders from the Doak River Cave is to get people to blend these two forms of consciousness and therefore solve the problems that we're in right now, okay? We know we can do it. We've heard it done before. Let's do it. So I actually have time for a question or two. And so if you could do a hand raise of some kind or another. And I actually saw, okay, I'm seeing Eric has his hand up. Liana has her hand up. Let's do Eric first. So Eric, can you unmute yourself and start your video and ask your question? I kind of hear you, but and if you're having trouble starting your video, I can help you with that a bit.
Please. Yes.
Okay, so you may see a sign saying, "Is it okay for me to to start your video?"
Okay. I guess.
I guess you'll just be the talking person.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you fine. Yes.
Great. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to for your presentation. Your insight and information presenting is very valuable. I think it's just a lot of what you say speaks to me, especially at the end when you're talking about the two different types of consciousness and mindset. For me, I'm starting to barely look at both sides of that. And one of the questions I have personally is energy, my personal energy, being able to find that balance. I think looking back at what you're saying about harmonizing that it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And it's very, very humbling. Listen to some of the different people's viewpoints, but it also takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to be able to find that balance. And I was wanting to ask you what your thoughts are on that.
It can take a lot of energy to try to do this harmonizing, but you also can get a lot of energy from this. I have a video clip. I don't know how well video works through Zoom, but this is a Sufi chanting circle, and these folks they are chanting something in Arabic, and these folks are I think they're in Russia actually, but they're chanting something. And then they start moving in a circle, and then they start running at top speed in a circle for a couple of minutes, and then stop. And then they go back to chanting, and they go back to stomping, and they run the other way for a couple of minutes and stop. So they're doing this. The video, I'll send you a link for it. If you put your email address in the chat box, everybody who puts their email address in the chat box, I'll send you the link for this video.
Perfect.
The video goes on for 2 hours. These folks are running at top speed for 2 hours. Some of the folks in the group are clearly, the long white beards, okay? They are, the folks are drenched in sweat, okay? and there's, at the end of 2 hours, they're still there. They're a little bit hoarse, okay? You can hear the quality is different from the beginning to the end. And the cool thing is they don't stop, Okay,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
video stops. They run out of video before they run out of energy. So that energy, you have to recognize if you think that your energy comes from this hunk of meat, you're mistaken. The energy comes from this other level through the hunk of meat. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So that will, once you perceive that, there are times when you will be energizing the rest of the room, but there are other times when you'll be drawing on the energy of the rest of the room, and that will be really cool.
Okay.
So look at the times when you need to be the source of the energy. You need to conserve your own, the body needs to conserve its own bodily energy, because the energy is not yours, you didn't make it.
Right.
And there are times when you need to project that energy to others, which is my Fred Meyer's go and do my part for the coronavirus is not nearly as important as the fear that it's generating, and we need to stomp out the fear. So thank you. Dottie, I see your hand is up.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.
Hi, Shariff. Can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you, and I'm close to seeing you soon, I think.
In a minute. Oh, it's not moving.
There you
There
go.
it is.
Okay, there you go. I remember you.
Hey, I know. Yes.
Good, good.
Hey, so the question that I have, this is great. I love this stuff, the last stuff here. So how are you? I mean, these are like, you know, what the tension of opposites, really, if you're talking about the two consciousnesses. So how are you working to resolve that, or to what was the word, harmonize those points of view?
Well,
what are you doing to do that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because all of my training is training in breaker thinking. It's training in breaker consciousness. From the time before I came out of the womb, my mother was thinking like a breaker. Okay, and so to balance that out, I've had to do some. The first thing you do is know that it needs to be balanced. To know that if you're in a room of people who just think like you, the room is off balance. That where are the keepers in your room? Where are the people who are going to bring the different energy in your room? And then how do you blend the different energy? So I know that I need access to keeper communities. And I need to work at getting that access. At one point in time, I was spending a lot of time with Native Americans. At one point in time, I was spending a lot of time with people from Africa. And Dottie, as you know, I've been spending a lot of time with everybody else in the world from all of the different countries I've been to, and spending time not with people who are like me, but people who are very much not like me. So that's been one way of doing it. The other way is recognizing that I needed some ways to break down my own consciousness. And I've been doing a lot. We know how to blend consciousness. That's not even a beginning question. We know the meditation techniques, the chanting techniques, the body movement. We know the food that we eat. We know the plant medicines that will break down individual consciousness, okay? But if you're in an ayahuasca ceremony, for example, that's a very powerful plant medicine. But you walk into the ceremony thinking, I am an individual, my consciousness stops right here, then that's all the ayahuasca will do for you. If you recognize that, no, this is my consciousness, and the consciousness is in you, and the consciousness is in everyone else, etc., you will have a very different experience. So one of the things that we will be doing, that I've been wanting to do for the past 6 years and haven't had the resources for it, and now in some very strange way, maybe the resources will show up, you know? Maybe with, one of the things that people are talking so much about with the coronavirus is isolation, you know? We've taken an isolated society and isolated it further and think that this is supposed to be a good thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe people will want to come together in really meaningful ways. We have been talking for the past year or so about oh goodness, time is okay. We've been talking for the past year or so about creating Imaginal Cafes, and this is a cafe where you go get some tea, go get some coffee, but also this is the place where you talk about and practice blended consciousness, where you walk in the door to share consciousness. You don't walk in the door to make more money. You don't walk in the door to get drunk. You don't walk in the door to in the door to find your soulmate or anything like that. Although all those things can happen, except for the drunk part. But you go there for the connection with consciousness and having the connection with consciousness. And so so yeah, and I need to sit down with some folks who are ready to do that, you know, ready to put time, effort, resources, etc., into making something like that happen. To recognize that breaker consciousness will do everything they can do to stop it from happening. They won't even know why. They'll just know, just like the horse boy people saying, no, we can't honor this kind of consciousness. We can't do this. And we'll ignore them. And then they'll come around. And then, because ultimately there is no them. There's just us. Some of us are getting on this train a lot later than others. But yeah, there's just us.
So can I ask you one more question? So what would it look like to blend those two consciousnesses? Because they seem so opposite.
I'm not sure. I just saw a movie, not a particularly good one, but the movie is called Lucy, and about a woman who winds up using 100% of her consciousness inadvertently. And so Morgan Freeman is the professor. Whatever he does, he's such a good one. When he was president, he made a great president. When he was God, he actually made a pretty good God. So he was a professor giving this lecture. And someone asked him, so he's saying at 20% consciousness use, you'll be able to do this and that and the other. At 30%, you could do that. And so I says, well, what happens when you get to 100%? He looks in the camera and says, I don't know. I do know. Oh, I'm sorry. That sets up my next commercial here. So in Chronicles of the Upheavals, which you know about, this is my first book and maybe my only book of science fiction. It's set 100 years in the future. 100 years in the future, we make it. So these folks write the book of how did we make it, which is what Chronicles of the Upheavals is. It's a number of different chapters in there. And in one chapter, they're experimenting with sending objects between the past and the present. I'm sorry, between the future and the present. And how do you do that? They're doing the experiment and they don't even know how they're doing the experiment. So that's how spongy this society is. If a week before the Berlin Wall fell, I had asked anybody in Berlin, how long will the Berlin Wall last? They all would have said, I'll die before this wall comes down. And a week later, the wall came down. That's how volatile our society can be. That's how quickly the caterpillar turns into a butterfly. We may be in the chrysalis right now. In which case, cool. Let's start thinking about how we are a butterfly and not think about this temporary situation that we're calling the coronavirus. We know a number of things about the coronavirus. Number one, most of us will not catch it. Number two, those of us who catch it, it's going to be a relatively mild flu. Number three, even for those in the at the high risk populations, people who are older and or who have compromised immune systems. They may get really sick, but they'll recover. And some portion of those people will die. And guess what? All of us are going to die. We seem to forget that. We seem to forget that all of us are, that the meat body will definitely die. And once we get over the fear of death, we'll just know this is not my time. I won't catch it. I'm not gonna, if I do catch it, it won't be serious because it's not my time. And so what we need to be doing is looking at who we are, how we are, and what we can do in the time that we've got. So I'm noticing that lots of folks have put in their email addresses, and if you haven't done that yet, I'm going to encourage you to do so. I see Teresa's back up to boot me off the stage. You don't have to get the hook. She's got a closet back there with this hook on it. And this has just been, it's really been a pleasure to work with you. I see a number of people have written that you want to do some more. I'm really looking forward to working with you at another opportunity, and to think of some opportunities where we can do that. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, thank you so much. The information that you provided, particularly for me in the last half hour, was amazing. And actually, I'm looking forward to your next email when you're going to start up something with practicing blended consciousness. So maybe I can get into that group. Maybe some other people would like to get that as well. Thank you, Dottie. Everybody applaud in your house.
Okay. Oh, no, actually, we can do, everybody turn on your videos and turn on your sound, unmute yourself so that we can say a mutual goodbye and a thank you and see you later. I see the videos popping up all over the place, and
Thank you.
so thank all of you. I really appreciated this.
Thank you.
We got through an awful lot. So
Thank you to everybody that stayed through the 2.5 hours, 2 3/4 hours. Glad you did, and of course we will make this video available so that you can, like Dottie, if you want to show it to your people, etc.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, so we will. I will sign us off. Talk to you at another point in time. Bye.
See you next month.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Bye.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.